We have a very small group today, but I'm very pleased to invite back Dr. Rachel Pearson as our presenter. Dr. Pearson is a clinical marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist in the Wichita community. She received her master's degree from Friends University in marriage and family therapy, and her doctorate from Wichita State University in community psychology and research. She has additional specialized training in difficulties with sexual desire and functioning, compulsive sexual behavior and unhealthy sexual boundaries, and marital and relationship issues. She conducts educational sessions and events in the Wichita area for sexual enhancement for couples as well as for individuals. Welcome back, Dr. Pearson. I really appreciate you doing this second session on sex and intimacy after cancer. Such an important topic that most of our oncologists are not willing or able to discuss. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to you. Thank you. I'm going to turn on the recording. Okay, we're good to go.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. Thanks for the opportunity to come speak. Today, we're going to talk about attitudes, values, and beliefs about intimacy after cancer, ways to improve your ability to communicate sexual needs and frustrations, and ways to learn techniques to enhance intimate experiences. So our attitudes towards sexuality have a significant influence on how we anticipate intimacy, experience intimacy, our understanding of our sexuality, and the ability to enjoy sex is highly influenced by our attitudes, values, and beliefs, which are also shaped by significant cultural and societal influences. And misunderstandings and unrealistic expectations about sex often play a role in sexual difficulties. So a significant portion of my work is around educating individuals on science-based sex information, kind of challenging maybe some myths or some unrealistic expectations that are often created by romance novels, Hollywood movies, pornography, locker room talk, wherever individuals are getting their information. Sometimes it can create opportunities for some misunderstandings. Early experiences have a significant impact on our sexuality. The following questions I'm going to ask address where you learned about sexuality and sexual behavior. And some of these questions can be pretty personal and may cause some discomfort. So please think about the following questions and feel free to skip any that cause you any discomfort. And you can return to the more difficult questions alone or with a therapist if you choose. So first, sexual knowledge. How did you learn about sex? Was it from books or siblings, friends, parents? And what did you learn from each source? So oftentimes I'll ask people like, where did you learn about sex? And a lot of times people kind of smile or laugh like, well, I kind of taught myself or had a friend who had a magazine, or some, will say, parents sat me down and we had a conversation about something. Were your parents at ease with sexuality? Could you ask them questions about sex? Do they provide age-appropriate sex education? So when I'm working with parents, oftentimes they're even more uncomfortable than the kiddo about like, how much should we share? What should we share? Are there resources about what to share? Did your parents make clear boundaries about privacy, theirs and yours? And could family members close doors, have privacy in the bathroom, ask before entering a room? And again, there are age-appropriate stages in which children, young adults should have privacy to bathe, to change clothes, to use the restroom. And so oftentimes I'll ask people, what was the role of privacy in your home? Did your parents display physical affection toward each other? Were your parents affectionate with you? How did other family members display affection? And I asked that to kind of get a sense of, was touch comfortable within the home? Was it a way that individuals expressed joy or approval? Was there not a lot of affection growing up? Because then affection in your romantic relationships might be something that you're not comfortable with or something that maybe you crave. And what attitudes towards nudity existed in your family? Was there discussion about bodies? Was there information about bodies? Because I see the full spectrum from people who are pretty comfortable with their body, kind of know, what a realistic, adult in their 50s might look like, and then other people that have never seen anyone but themselves nude and may be quite uncomfortable with being nude or seeing others. How did you relate personally to your mother and father? Were you close or distant? Did you want to be like your mom? Did you want to be like your father? Or was there another caregiver that you were close to? So some individuals might be raised in families with a single parent, or raised by a grandparent or a sibling or another caregiver, or families with two moms or two dads. Also in my practice, I see a lot of polyamorous couples where there might be multiple caregivers. And so I like to get a sense of who were they close to? And what messages did your family members give you about your body? Were there any messages about your genitals? So I work with some individuals where there was no discussion at all about their genitals, and they're uncomfortable to use scientific terms around body parts. And other individuals that are very comfortable with the words because, penis and vulva and vagina are just as common terms that their families would use as, elbows or your knees. And how did the men in your family talk about women's bodies? How did women talk about men's bodies? Was it comfortable to talk about members of the same gender, members of the opposite gender? What were the attitudes around that? Describe the attitudes towards sex that you perceived from religious or philosophical beliefs you were taught as a child. So I often like to ask individuals if they have a spiritual or religious practice that they currently practice or that they were raised in. Some individuals are still practicing the faith or religious belief that was taught in the house that they grew up in. Some are not. And I like to kind of get a sense of, were there any sex positive messages that you received from spiritual, religious, faith beliefs? Were there any negative messages? Because if you receive negative messages about your body, if your body belongs to you, if your body has any shame, that's going to impact sexual functioning. And did you ever have an upsetting or frightening sexual experience as a child? And could you talk about it? If yes, with whom? And was that person supportive of you? So oftentimes we can think of trauma as it has to be like a capital T trauma, like, being assaulted by a stranger in a parking lot kind of thing. But when I ask individuals this question, sometimes it's a pretty traumatic thing for them if it occurred when they were a child, and could have been, something as simple as, a parent that was driving a car in a frightening way. And if it's a sexual experience, might be, a family member or a loved one or a coach or a mentor that touched their body in a way that was unclear what the intention was unclear if that was okay touch or not. And so sometimes that can frame our beliefs around our body and our sexuality. And it's also very important, did they have someone they could talk to? Could they talk to a sibling? Did they go to a parent? Were they able to talk to a trusted caregiver to say, this made me uncomfortable, and what am I supposed to do about that? And how have you been influenced by media, if that's television, music, films, books, magazines, pornography, in matters of sex, sexuality, and relationships? Lots of enjoyment can be had from Hollywood movies, from Lifetime television movie, from Netflix shows that can be used for entertainment. But for some people, that's where their primary source of sexual information comes from. And so that can create some unrealistic expectations, irrational beliefs, because sex doesn't always look like it does in the movies. And so I'll tell people, we can enjoy a nice war movie, but you realize that people aren't actually being killed in that Hollywood movie. It's all pretend. And so in a lot of television and films, if it's, just fantasy, that may not be what sex actually looks like for real life human beings. What helpful messages about sex and sexuality did you receive from the media? So in my own life, one of the first adult movies I ever saw was Top Gun. So super excited that the new one is out. But I received lots of messages from that movie around sex and sexuality because I was probably too young to be watching that. But we can receive some helpful messages, at least in Top Gun for me as a kid. I saw that two people can share some pleasure. Okay, well, it looks like those people are having a good time. So that must be an enjoyable thing that grown-ups do. So we can receive some helpful messages too. And any harmful messages you receive from the media. There is all sorts of research around the role of advertising and what it can teach people about their bodies, because often advertising is used to tell us that there's something wrong with us, something we need to change, something we need to buy. If you just get this mascara, if you just wear this push-up bra, if you just have this, hair color, then you will be sexy. And so those messages can often make us feel like we aren't enough, we don't have enough, that we'll never attain enough, which is the goal, so that we'll spend money. But those messages influence more than most people realize. So then you might write a list of topics related to sex and sexuality that you'd like more information about. If any of these questions, kind of jog some thoughts for you or some things you might want to further explore. So then sexual attitudes, our views on our body and physical appearance are intertwined with our sexual identity. Attitudes towards sex can have an enormous influence on why we might seek sex, if we enjoy it, and how we work through sexual problems. So how well do you feel about your body? Do you like yourself? Are you hard on yourself sometimes? Do you find that your body is attractive? Do you feel like you're overweight, underweight, well proportioned? Do you feel comfortable with your nude body? Do you feel comfortable being nude around your partner? Why or why not? So some women that I work with are very comfortable being nude by themselves in their own body. Maybe they enjoy dancing in their room or getting ready to go in the morning. But if there's a partner around, all of a sudden it changes. Or they may feel comfortable around, being nude by themselves, but maybe not if their partner is also nude, because sometimes there's an expectation. If there's two naked bodies, that means something's supposed to occur, right? Not necessarily. So having, exploring how you feel about nudity. And then how do you feel about your partner's body? Do you feel comfortable when your partner is nude around you? Sexual beliefs. How do you feel about sex? What words come to mind? Is sex pleasurable, sensuous, comfortable, painful, dirty? A lot of times I ask people to give me some words on how they feel about sex, just to kind of get a sense of what are their attitudes around it? What words just come to mind? And how often do you desire or prefer sex? How does this compare to your partner or partners? One of the most frequent issues that brings people in coupled relationships into my office is desire differences. And if it's a heterosexual relationship, sometimes it's the female that has a higher desire for sex. And so then negotiating, okay, so what happens if one partner is wanting it more than the other? And then what are your attitudes around pornography and erotic material, like pictures, books, videos? Do you view them? Is your partner? Do either of you want to? And this is a question I ask because I'm not anti-pornography. I think that erotic material, which may or may not involve bodies or nudity or some element of sexuality, can be very educational. And there are ways that it can be done very tastefully, very affirming, and be used as educational material to get a sense of like, okay, what can bodies do? And there's great information for different positions and different techniques that people can use with differently abled bodies. So as I mentioned in the presentation last week, there's different pillows and grab bars and things that people can hold on to if they've had trauma to the body, maybe an accident or war or medical situations where maybe they need to learn ways to be able to try different positions with different bodies. One of the most common questions I get is, am I normal? So now that you've examined your sexual attitudes, you may wonder, am I normal? It's a question I get a lot. And my answer is, the question is not if it's normal, but if it's a problem for you or your relationship. So I work with some couples and they have sex maybe, 4 times a year, once a season. And if they're both good with that, then there's not really a problem. Other couples that are having sex multiple times a week. And if that's working for all the parties involved, then not a problem. But if there's a desire difference within the relationship, or if there's pain going on, or if there's shame around a fantasy or a desire, then maybe that's worth exploring if it's causing distress for you or the relationship. So sexual attitudes and preferences can be harmful if the behavior is illegal. So sometimes I work with individuals who've gotten into legal trouble around maybe viewing pornography at work. That's caused them difficulty. Or, a couple that thought it would be fun to have sex in the park. Sometimes that can get you into trouble. Or if the behavior is compulsive in some way, if you're finding that it's getting in your way in some way. So for individuals that maybe are having intrusive thoughts or they're having panic attacks around sexuality. So that's negatively impacting their ability to work or care for their family. Or if it creates problems for the partner, because couples aren't going to agree on everything. And just because you and your partner don't have the same preferences or don't agree on when or how to have sex, that doesn't mean that anything is wrong with either of you. So oftentimes I compare intimacy to like going out to eat. And that oftentimes people will order different things off the menu. They'll have different favorite foods. Maybe somebody wants an appetizer and somebody else wants to start with dessert. And maybe you finish your meals at different times. And I use that analogy to describe the many different preferences that we can have around sexuality and sexual intimacy. And we don't think anything's wrong with us if we want completely different food than our partner does. And there's nothing wrong if you have completely different preferences sexually with what your partner wants. Questions around any of that?
Rachel, this is Judy. I'm just wondering, as we talk about attitudes and so on, if you and your partner have very different attitudes culturally because of the way you were raised and your family beliefs, is that something that they should be seeking a sex therapist to discuss, or what do you recommend that they do?
I think therapy can be really beneficial to normalize both people's experience. Because people tend to think that, their way is the right way, their family is the right family, the way they were raised is the right way. And they're both right. They're both absolutely right. So if I have a relationship system where couples were raised in different families with maybe different comforts around touch, different expectations around touch, different preferences and need for touch. That's actually quite common. It's very common for someone who comes from a high touch family where everyone's hugging and kissing and in each other's space to be in a relationship with someone who's like, oh, we're going to hug now. Okay. That those opposites often attract. Or someone who was raised in a sex positive family where we use the words and everybody kind of talks about it. It's not a big deal to maybe come from someone where this is a private matter. And why would we ever tell anyone about anything that we're doing? And both are completely normal and both are right. And so finding healthy ways to reach mutually agreed upon boundaries of what do we share with family? What do we talk about in public? How often are we going to be intimate? How often do we hug? How long do we hug? What does a hug even look like? Can be really helpful in a safe space like therapy so that both people feel understood, both people can process any shame, any anger, because oftentimes couples try to talk about it and hurt feelings can happen because we both think our family is right. And then finding ways to create whatever's right for that couple.
Thank you.
So 2 resources here. Emily Nagoski wrote a book called Come As You Are, and it is a book I recommend to all people, especially females. It takes a scientific look at female sexual arousal, female sexual response. And she uses the dual control model of looking at sexuality and sexual response like a car that has brakes and accelerators, and helps women identify what are the accelerators, the things that really get you going and you want to be intimate, and what are the brakes, what are the things that make you go, I don't really want to do that. And every woman is different. So for some women, if they have a fight with their partner, that might be an accelerator. Like, it was passionate and we were yelling and we almost didn't make it, and let's get naked. And another woman, an argument might be, it was scary and it got loud and I don't even know if I can be in the same room with you right now. I just need some time. Same thing, same stimuli, but completely different responses. So I recommend that women read it, but I also recommend that their partners read it, especially if they're in a heterosexual relationship, because it can be helpful for men to go, oh, so that's why. Oh, okay. To help men understand what their partner's brakes and accelerators are, so that they can encourage those accelerators and decrease any of the brakes. And then Swept Away, an older book, great book, that really talks about anxieties a lot of women can have around their sexuality, and how, even though it was written in 1984, still applies today, that women are often taught to dampen their sexuality, be afraid of their sexuality, not let anybody know about their sexuality because it can be dangerous for women to be sexual. And in many ways in our society, yes, it can. But there can also be very safe, empowering ways that women can identify their sexuality and celebrate it. So homework, if you feel comfortable, you can look at your body in the mirror, a full-length mirror if you have one, to just kind of get a sense of, how do you feel about yourself when you look at your body? And then remove as much clothing as you're comfortable with, and look again at your body. What reactions do you have? Are there particular parts of your body that you're really excited about? Parts of your body that you're proud of? Parts of your body that make you uncomfortable? Maybe parts of your body that you didn't even want to look at, and maybe you kept some clothing on because you'd rather not look at that area. Something to consider in terms of how you feel about your body. And then what thoughts and emotions do you have as you look at these different areas of your body? So some women can experience grief, some women can experience anger. There can be all sorts of memories connected to different parts of the body. We can have scarring. We can have different physical ailments. Maybe things aren't quite where they used to be. Maybe things have changed in some way. And sometimes that can feel very empowering. Sometimes that can feel very sexy. Sometimes that can feel very confusing. Sometimes there can be grief with that.